if you've already created a need for your product or identified the need for your product or service or whatever your startup is, start that investment journey as early as possible. But in order to start that journey as early as possible, make sure you've got a really good, solid pitch deck, professional looking. I think it's really, really imperative. I didn't realize actually how imperative that was, probably until halfway through my journey. Good, solid pitch deck.
Hello, today we have Darren Evans. He is the CEO of AfterCloud. He spent the last 25 years working for and heading up companies that provide software solutions for organizations that provide care. Darren managed and led the team that rolled out some of the first pan-London social prescribing sites. During this time, he saw the huge impact made to people's lives by using digital technology, specifically mobile platforms, and this led him to develop his own apps and technology solutions. In 2019, he set up AfterCloud, a digital platform that can manage legacy and digital assets for future generations. Thank you for joining us, Darren.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here, David. Good morning.
Good morning. So this podcast is for founders that are looking to raise funds, and that is something that you have done recently, and that's why you're on the show, to tell us all about it and all the little secrets and your own particular journey on that. So I want to sort of go back to the beginning and just talk about, we talked about your background in care and medical sort of profession in that sector, but I want to talk about what sort of brought you on to start AfterCloud. How did that journey go, and what was the sort of thinking behind that, and what was the goal behind that when you set it up?
Okay, yeah, it's an interesting journey because as you rightly mentioned, I've been kind of involved in health and social care predominantly for about 25 years. A little over 3 years ago, so going back to, almost 4 years, but 2019, we were, I was providing some consultancy to quite a large acquisitional growth business in London. They're one of the largest software houses now in the UK. And at the same time, my wife and my sister-in-law were primary carers for my mother-in-law, who had a very aggressive form of Lewy body dementia. Anyway, cut a long story short, it was 10 months, awful time for the family, but she died within that time frame. And it was post-funeral, and we were going through, family possessions and whatnot, as you do. And we were going through this family photo album. And my son, who was kind of 11 and a half, there or thereabouts at the time, was asking my wife, who's that? Who's this? Who's that? And we asked around the room, no one had any clue. And we quickly realized that, when that person dies, that whole library of information is gone. It's lost unless someone does something. Now, that coupled with the fact that our digital footprint is growing exponentially, day on day, week on week, month on month, year on year, we realized really that we could do something. It was actually Dylan that said to me, "Look, Dad, you work in technology. Can't you do something that will assist other people?" And that was the birth of the idea of AfterCloud.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing to set up, and it seems it's one of those things we think, well, why hasn't anyone else thought of it? Did you have any competitors in the space, or anyone sort of close to it?
There are a few sort of digital repositories, let's say, that were sort of around. But with my background in social care, I kind of looked at the two and thought, actually, there's this bridge that could be a gap, really, that we could, hone in on, I guess, to assist in bridging that gap. There are competitors, and there have been a few copycats since, I have to say. But we are approaching it slightly differently. So we're coming at it from a social care perspective. And capturing life stories for the living. That's kind of what we're passionate about doing.
Yeah. So what form does that take then? Who enters the data?
Well, it's an element of both. So what we've got at the moment are people, i.e. you, I, and other people telling their life stories the way they want it to be portrayed.
Yeah.
So we capture life stories utilizing 4 elements of multimedia: images, video, letters, and audio. And all of those things combine to make up what we call a moment. And then that's plotted chronologically on a timeline, which is our IP, effectively, compacting those multimedia elements. So yeah, that's essentially how it works, and it can either be applied by the individuals or by families prior to someone going into care. The rationale behind that is that a new carer or someone providing care can provide better and more person-centered care in a care setting with the background story to that individual.
Okay, so the carer kind of learns about the person they're caring for, and they can build up this sort of story of their life, and that's interesting for them, and it's interesting for the person in care, keeps their mind active, keeps them talking and communicating. I guess it works well for both areas in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And similarly, we can we're working with a couple of research establishments, universities, essentially looking at improving cognitive recall for people living with dementia, because what we can also do is applying music, specific pieces of music to a timeline at a specific point will take that person back on that journey, and therefore improve their cognitive recall for that memory or particular moment.
Is that in the platform? Because you've got to worry about rights, digital rights and stuff like that, have you? Or is it not? Does it not appear on their timeline, the music?
No, it's kind of clips or elements of music that they can apply within their moment.
Okay, so, but is there not licensing issues with that, with music?
Not that I see, because it's capturing audio, i.e. voice.
Right.
You can apply music to a timeline as well, so it's kind of it's personal.
Okay.
And it's not sharing it with the wider public.
Okay, so in 2019, I'm guessing that you invested quite a bit in the technology. Tell us about the initial investment that you made, or how did you start building it? Was it very lean? Did you invest quite a lot? How did that come about?
Yeah, we bootstrapped from outset, really. It was never a consideration to raise money.
Right.
It was always from the heart. We wanted to develop something that would assist and help other families. And what's happened since then? So to answer your question, we've invested probably the best part of 40-50K on the platform and developing the apps and making sure that they're ORCA registered and approved, as an example. So that's the digital health app library, ORCA, ORCHA. So we now have 3 apps. So a portfolio of moments, journals. Moments is the original AfterCloud. So that's the one that's used or utilized in end of life and care settings. We're gifting that now, not to lose sight of where we started, because we have other markets that we serve with our portfolio of 3 apps, and all 3 are ORCA. So we have moments serving that market. We have timelines, sort of generic, working across various areas, which I can go into. And then we've also got journals, which is utilized specifically in children's settings, so looked after children, children's services, residential care environments.
Okay, so these are sort of separate products, and AfterCloud is the sort of umbrella brand, is it?
Exactly that, yeah. AfterCloud, which was the original concept, became the umbrella brand. We then developed Moments, which was the original app. On the back of the beta pilot that we ran in real world settings, that was around 10 months. A lot of the feedback that we received was, this is a fantastic app, but we'd really like to see our life moments plotted chronologically, which led us to timelines. And then last year, I've been a judge on the Great British Care Show Awards for a number of years. And last year they asked me to judge the children's category. And we did that. Well, I did that. And then after the award ceremony, got chatting to one of the guys, and he said, we've got this software that works and enables us to share images with family members and on behalf of the children, but it's a bit clunky. So we said, well, have a look at our app, which they did. They ran it in a pilot. loved it. We then renamed it, made a few iterations for children's services, locked it down a little bit more, so that you can't change user profiles, and called it Journals. And that's now working in children's settings.
Okay, so you had an initial idea, and then you fragmented it into different brands. And is it because they had very different audiences? Is that why you did that, or was there another reason?
No, well, what we found was, again, primarily, I think because of my background in social care, was that as people started utilizing apps, they came up with their own way of working within the various markets that we now serve. So we just sort of went with it, really, and iterated for the market. Another example of that is timelines. When it started working, was starting to be applied retrospectively. So I'll give you a couple of examples of that. We've got 2 live timelines in Boston as an example, where people have applied it to their headstones. So in remembrance of someone specific. In both of these cases, their fathers. One was the chief of police in Melrose in Boston, and another one is a Crimean War veteran. And because they've been applied retrospectively, it naturally transpires that actually it can be applied to statues, monuments, buildings, places. So timelines can create a chronological history of whatever you want to portray. And that is what it then established us as a sort of another channel, if you like, for heritage.
Is that like an AR technology where you go to a monument and you can see the history of that monument or that person?
Not yet, but we can work with partners to do that and achieve that. What's really fascinating is that this isn't announced yet, so this is it's actually as of the 1st of June, so just literally Thursday last week, I think it was it? We've become an Experience Oxfordshire partner. Experience Oxfordshire are a new local visitor economy partner, so what they call an LVEP. They used to be called DMOs, direct management organisations that manage heritage sites across a locality. So Experience Oxfordshire, one of the first 15 LVEPs now under Visit England, and we're one of their official partners, because we're also involved in a big statue unveil in September of a very famous person, and that's Agatha Christie. So that's going to be an interesting one as well.
That's interesting. So you're sort of, we talk about like some apps can really benefit from influencers. You're actually using influencers after the grave, which is quite interesting. So sort of tapping into that audience of Agatha Christie, all the people that know about them, and using that as an example for your platform. Is that right?
Yeah, it's
amazing.
It became, I mean, none of this was in the grand scheme. It just came. What's interesting is that by doing this, it kind of identifies the fact that we're an entry level sort of smart city, because you can apply chronological data.
Yeah,
it can apply to anything, which is really, really important about heritage and asset sites, because a lot of them are currently standing there doing nothing for their owners. Whereas you apply a timeline to a statue or a monument or a building, and you can effectively offer the visitor a deeper insight into that asset, but you can also commercialize it as well.
Okay, I want to bring it into the zone of what the people are listening to, which is sort of your journey about how it came about to actually think about raising. Now, one of the early things with a lot of tech platforms is getting that traction. So what can you say about your early days? You've developed the app, you've put the money in, you spent 50,000, you developed it, you've got something that works, you've got something maybe more than an MVP. How did you get that initial traction, and how much did you think that you needed to sort of turn a profit or to then ask for investment?
Well, it's more to do now with the traction that we have gained to now really sort of penetrate the market and make sure that we don't lose sight of the opportunity that we have across the three verticals that we want to serve. And that's the reason really we want to to raise, because we want to employ. Well, it's growth capital ultimately now. Going back to your question about original traction, really it was from my experience again in social care and working with colleagues that know where the technology can be applied. That's largely residential and domiciliary care environments for social care, residential environments for children's services. But because we have an app portfolio, it lends itself quite well to each of those.
So you knew that there was potential there in those markets because you'd worked in those areas of business, and you took the app to them to demonstrate, or how did you get it out to all these different sites there? Because there must be quite a lot of them.
It's growing. I think what I will say is that COVID played its part in this, because, as I said, we started just before lockdown, and what lockdown helped us with is twofold actually. One, it made everybody implicitly aware of their own mortality. People were kind of it was portrayed on the media, wasn't it, pretty much daily. But the other thing it enabled us to do was have really good, meaningful conversations via these types of platforms. The world over, we quite quickly built a core advisory team in the markets that we want to serve, and that again lends itself to referral within those specific markets, because these are people of importance and key position.
Okay, so you conducted most of your sort of trials over Zoom, is that right?
Demonstrations. And yeah, I mean, lots and lots of demonstrations over Zoom, lots of communication over Zoom. Not that it's and other channels, Google and the like.
So what format did that take then? Did you send out initial email saying, "Hey, I've got this platform, I'd like to demo it," and you got meetings that way?
Yeah, a lot of cold outreach, I have to say, to begin with. You have to see, put yourself out there and tell people what you're about, really. A lot of cold outreach to begin with.
And advertising? A lot
of referral. Sorry.
Any advertising or social media advertising or anything like that?
Minimal. I have to say, we've not really done any proactive marketing or paid for advertising as such. The odd posts here and there, and similarly with the various social media channels that we utilize, but not masses. It's all in-house.
So you're saying cold outreach and referrals then. So the word was getting around, and people, and you were getting meetings through that way, and that got you enough traction to develop the product or to make some profit, or how did that initial cold outreach lead into the next sort of phase?
It's just gradually building, and I think for anything, it's there is no end goal. It's a gradual build. It's a gradual accelerated pace from initial cold outreach to referral to becoming quite busy. I mean, when people talk to people, and it just naturally snowballs.
You had a sort of natural virality with the product, which then led to the traction. And I'm guessing you're continually developing the product, and these other branches came off it.
Yeah. So essentially, Dave, what we're doing now is we have, children. Let's take children's services specifically. We have now a product steering group, which is made up of key individuals within the sector, but also users, or so children specific. I mean, I was involved in a meeting last week with a children's services provider down in Wales. Fantastic service. And as part of their advisory board within their own group, they have children that sit on the advisory. So these are looked after children that actually sit within the advisory team. And it was just fantastic to see. So we do that element as well. We pull in users to sort of conduct our product steering group.
Okay, that's good. So after getting some traction, and I'm guessing that there must have been a tipping point at which point you thought, right, we can't take this any further without investment. So tell us about that particular period of time that actually made you decide to go and get that investment.
So we're on that journey as we speak. We're trying to get investment right now. Again, for growth capital, ultimately to sort of put us out there a bit more. We punch above our weight a little bit, in the sense that people think that we are bigger than we are. I guess, I don't know, but I mentioned at outset, it was never really an important thing for me to do in terms of creating the business for investment. It was always an afterthought, really. But we're now getting to the point where we are being inundated with referrals, requests, and we think actually that we do need to grow the team. We've got a sort of small organic team anyway, working largely virtually, but we need to grow, and obviously in order to do that, we need growth capital to sort of continue our development and also continue our growth.
So is it you're at the point now where you cannot fulfill the amount of orders that's coming through?
Well, it'd be nice to say that. I mean, we can manage, but what we really want to try and do is not lose sight of the opportunities that we have within the markets that we serve.
So what's been the main narrative of the story that you've been telling investors, and what's been the thrust of your outreach? Is it the growth? Is it the not being able to supply, or is it the market? What message do you mainly put out to investors?
Again, I think that's been lacking, if I'm brutally honest. I've not reached out as much as I should do, or as early as I should have done. And I think for any other entrepreneurs on this journey that are looking to start up or do whatever, I would say start reaching out to investors as early as you can, as soon as you start, really. I've spoken with investors more recently that have said, you're too far down the line now. We may have invested at an earlier stage because it would have been a higher risk. So it's a kind of catch-22. In some respects, you'll find a lot of angels, a lot of investors will want to see traction, and then in other respects, people want a higher degree of risk because they can make more money in the longer term. As I said, money was never a concern for us. Initially, we didn't set up to. It was based on lived experience and a market need.
But you have secured some funding.
Yeah, we've got a lead investor. Absolutely, we've got a lead investor who's based out in New Zealand. Actually, we're in discussion now with another 4 angels, which is continuously ongoing. I mean, I've been in communication with 2 of them for the best part of 6 months. So that due diligence process is it's ongoing. And clearly, as we move into other markets, they're minimizing their risk because we're already growing. We've got a great valuation recently. So yeah, well, I mean, we are now going for seed. That's essentially what we're doing.
Okay, so that's really what I wanted to sort of get at then. I think you're being a bit too modest for your own good there, like you're saying that your outreach hasn't been that good, but you've already got a lead investor. I mean, a lot of the people listening to this are at that point where they want to try and find that lead investor. So they want to kind of get insights as to how you went about it, what was the process, how did you get that lead investor? Tell us about that then. You decided to get investment, you put your materials together, which we can talk about as well. But just tell us about that how did that initial investor get on board? How did you reach out to them? How did you get them?
So I'm very, very fortunate in that my lead investor is an ex-boss, and he approached me from the output on LinkedIn. Interestingly, I didn't approach him, so he saw that we were growing. And the other interesting fact is that a couple of the I would say heavyweight investors that we're having discussions with now have also said, we've seen your progression and we've been following your progression. So we've been sort of sending sound bites out very subliminally, really, over the course of our growth period. And
in LinkedIn,
yeah, predominantly, actually. So LinkedIn and Facebook, we've had a monthly blog from Outset, which is now booked up until October, November time. And I think it's just making sure that people's voices are heard, really, from the communities and the markets that we serve. But yeah, he approached me from that, and as I said, a couple of the other conversations I've had more recently, they've noted that they've been continuously monitoring, I guess. So we are known in certain areas. I think we're too early, clearly, for VC.
Yeah.
But for seed, for angels, it's about right now.
So that's really interesting. So I think that's quite unusual, certainly from what I've done, the investors, the founders that I've spoke to, the businesses that I've spoke to, that your own output on LinkedIn and social media has attracted interest for investors, even though you weren't actively looking for it.
Yeah.
So tell us about your social media strategy then.
Well, I don't know if there's a strategy. I know I've just started to utilize LinkedIn more in terms of engagement, I think, actually.
Yeah.
Just to sort of put little sound bites out there about what we were doing, which is just, caught attention, I guess. There really isn't much strategy there involved. We have a go-to-market strategy and a business plan, and all the other things that you would expect. But our go-to-market strategy is slightly different to what I've been doing on LinkedIn. It's completely different. I mean, there's a marketing prowess as part of that strategy. So we know what we need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the investor followed you on LinkedIn. It was a contact of yours, an old boss of yours. So obviously, sort of a high net worth, would you say, or a business leader in that particular sector?
Yeah, twofold. He's both high net worth and business leader, and he saw what I did for his business. He said to me, probably a month or so ago, he said, "Look, I'm investing in you as an individual rather than, it's a slightly different." Slightly different investment, I guess, than you would normally see in this sort of environment.
Right. So he wanted to invest in you. He believed in you. He knew that you were the right person. But did you make a presentation for him, or was he just like, here's the checkbook, like here's the money, just go for it?
This is the thing. So he's only investing on match. So we've got to find a match,
right,
for him to then invest. So it's promised, it's there. I'm assured it's coming, but we have to match that.
Okay.
And part of that match is then half of what we're looking to fund for our seed.
Okay. And so how much has been sort of pledged, and how much are you looking for?
So 75 is already pledged.
Yeah.
We're looking to match it with another 75, although I've got two angels that look to probably to invest 150. I'm not sure. We'll see.
Yeah.
But we're trying to raise currently 300, and that's based on a 1.5 million valuation.
Okay. So how did you get those other two angels involved then? How did you find them?
So again, one of them commented on one of my posts on LinkedIn, and I reached out to him, not knowing he was an angel, actually, just picked up conversation. Then he said, "Look, I've got a real interest in what you're doing in this specific area. Tell me more." And that led to another conversation. Then he brought another person in. Then they told me that they were part of an angel network, and then it evolved from there. It was just an original conversation based on a comment he made on one of my posts. So it's engagement, I guess, more than outreach.
It's really interesting that kind of all of these people have come to you. You must be doing something incredibly, must be doing the right things.
I mean, I've reached out to a couple of early stage VCs, and I've tried to put together a formatted, sensible email, and they have so many week on week that I just wanted to approach it slightly differently. So for me, we know that we're building this business. We know it's going to be successful. I'm really confident because we've already started penetrating the given markets that we serve. And that's having a natural ongoing referral effect in its own markets. What we want to do is expedite that growth through investment. So it's kind of a little bit of a different strategy, I guess, David, because I think for people to approach us, it's just naturally transpired that way. It's quite strange.
Yeah, it's quite unusual, but I mean, I guess you're still wanting to get pitch decks together and doing your own outreach. So how has that process gone?
I think, again, going back to any entrepreneurs that are sort of looking into the market, they need a really good professional pitch deck, one that stands up above, all the others, and the ones that you provide. I would suggest that's not it's not a promotion. I'm just saying that
by all means promote me.
No, I should, because they need to be professional, because you've got a very, very short window of opportunity in terms of capturing 15 seconds probably of their time, and you've got to stand out amongst all the others that are out there. Ours is a little bit different because we're niche in terms of what we offer. So AfterCloud, by definition, by brand, kind of tells you instinctively what it is we do already. A lot of people have told us that you've got a great brand, you've got good market penetration, you've got great growth signs. So we're in a good place in that sense. But yeah, they any new market entrants, they need that credibility of a fantastic pitch deck.
Yeah. So tell us about were there any surprises about the process or any documents or information that you needed to supply during the due diligence that you maybe weren't prepared for or wasn't, didn't realize that you had to do? Tell us about that sort of process.
Again, I think for any new entrepreneur coming in with any idea, really, there's so much you need to learn quite quickly as part of that due deal process. Your deal room, your business structure, having the relevant documents in place that you need as part of that due deal process. Pitch deck, as we mentioned, is important. Again, we're slightly different in the sense that we've got product brochures, we've got the business plan, which is another integral part of what you'll need. Forecasting, 3-5 years as an example, you need. Showing that potential growth for investors, it's critical, but it's not something you think initially, and there are people that offer services that cover all those aspects, but what we did was we've gone onto a credible platform that manages that process for us.
What was the platform?
Seed Legals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So tell us about what they did and what the shortfall was that they could fill up.
Well, they just structured it so that everything's contained in one place, and we point investors to one area, one specific link, and there you are. That's our deal room. That's our setup. Here are this is our term sheet, and all of these things you learn as you sort of grow. But they've kind of managed that process for us, which is fantastic. It's all set up, and that will be for subsequent rounds as well, clearly, because once we've got the seed, we're pretty much on a fast track for growth then, because as I said, we know the markets we want to serve, and we can really plow headlong into that growth strategy for Series A then.
And just for some founders that are not familiar with this, what was exactly in your deal room? Because I think a lot of the people sort of talk about deal rooms, and I guess it's more just like a folder of documents. Just tell us what documents you had to provide.
Our business plan is in there, our forecast is in there, our pitch deck is in there clearly, our business and administration, so the company docs are in there as well. Mm-hmm. The term sheet is in there, and any other collateral you think is important for investors to know, really. There's no right or wrong in that, but yeah, all the relevant component parts. I mean, we've got things like product brochures in there as well, because it's just, just added collateral.
All the stuff that investors need to see, really.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to get all that stuff together?
It's been piecemeal, I have to say, over time. So we've put things together. I mean, the first document that we originally put together was the business plan, because it gave us that template with which to work from, and that iterates over a course of time. Anyway, we are constantly updating our business plan based on real world scenarios. So it's been constantly updated every month, every couple of months. But yeah, all the documents that you would expect.
Yeah, absolutely. So now you've got about 300 pledged, but you're in this raising process at the moment. What are you doing at the moment to get in front of new investors?
Not a great deal, I have to say. And again, my investor outreach is poor. I speak to other. We partnered actually recently with another startup within the care sector, who is also going for funding, but their penetration rate is a lot bigger than ours. I mean, they're constantly out there, pushing. We don't really. The problem I find is, to raise investment is a full-time job. It really is. I mean, you've got to spend an awful lot of time nurturing relationships, contacting, re-nurturing, recontacting. It's a constant. So you have to then think, do I spend the bulk of my time trying to raise investment, or do I spend the bulk of my time managing the business and growing the company? And so I see it's twofold, really. I manage both aspects of that now, and it's most of my activity daily is in response to either customer requests or growth potential, i.e. talking to different customers, rather than investment outreach. So to answer your question, my investment outreach is poor. It needs to be better.
I mean, I can see a lot of parallels between having a successful marketing campaign and nurturing those potential clients, and the same sort of campaign to investors. Do you see any sort of parallels between those two things? Have you done sort of big marketing campaigns for your company?
No, not as yet, in truth. They're sort of subliminal. We've got a database where we store, active users and people that are interested in our newsletter and that sort of thing. And we're growing on Twitter, we're growing on Insta, we're growing on the various socials. But I think you're right. It needs to run in parallel in a similar sort of format, marketing to investors, keeping them updated. What I've actually started to do more recently is, for any potential angels that we're discussing our investment with, we've got one guy that we were talking to who's already sort of committed to our Series A. So he's saying, look, we want to be involved in your Series A, but tell us when you get there, kind of scenario, which is interesting. So what we tend to do is a sort of periodic update, using a mini, almost like a mini deck, but then I'll create a recorded voiceover, just updating them on certain aspects of the business. And that tends to work particularly well. So
is that for current investors that you're in talks with?
Yeah. Okay. And any that come on hereafter.
So what's that? What's that dialogue like then? So they've shown an initial interest and they're saying, keep me updated. How does the dialogue go?
It's ongoing. So they'll say, okay, well, this is great. Now show us this, show us that metric. We want to see that. They want to, I think from an investment perspective, it's always looking at de-risking a particular investment. For some, it's actually, look, I know there's a risk in investment. Of course there is. But I want a relevant or relative share for my investment, for my risk. And that's that's a discussion that's continual. It's yeah, you're in a negotiation point at that point, and that's what keeps the conversation going, I guess.
Very interesting. So you must have learned a hell of a lot during this process. I can tell that you've learned a hell of a lot. What advice would you give to founders in a bit of an earlier stage than you? Maybe capitalizing on or not making some mistakes that you've made, or trying to benefit from some of the things that you have done right. I mean, is there any sort of key advice that you could give off the top of your head?
Yeah, 100%. I think the first thing is start your investment journey as early as possible. It doesn't matter if you've already created a need for your product or identified the need for your product or service or whatever your startup is, start that investment journey as early as possible. So start outreach with angel investment networks, high net profile family offices, etc., etc. Just start that journey as early as possible. But in order to start that journey as early as possible, make sure you've got a really good, solid pitch deck, professional looking. I think it's really, really imperative. I didn't realize actually how imperative that was probably until halfway through my journey, and even then it's probably too late. We're in discussion, you and I, now about our pitch deck for Series A. But if I went back 12 months, I would have, we would have done that already, if that makes sense. Whereas we created our own, and then we iterated from a design agency that one of our team works within. So it's it was okay in that sense, but it's not as, I don't think is professional or as dynamic as perhaps you would have produced.
Yeah, maybe
in your experience and background, it's kind of.
Yeah, sure. So what does the future of the company look like? So you're very close to getting this investment. What will it mean, and how will that change the company going forward?
Well, huge potential growth opportunity and revenue, because we a couple of the markets that we're serving at the moment, Canada in particular, interestingly, we're having multiple conversations with. I can't speak actually because I've got a meeting this evening.
Yeah.
But I'll make an announcement next week potentially in relation to Canada and what we're involved in Canada. Same for US. I mean, these are big, huge markets that we've not really penetrated yet. We've got great advisory boards and teams in the relevant countries, and a smattering of sort of early interest. But the huge growth potential is in those markets, Canada, US. Here in the UK, we've got so much to go at. It's, within those three verticals, for me, it's getting the investment on board so that I can build the team around those three areas and then concentrate on growth.
Did you outline very specifically the growth strategy in your presentation to investors? Did you have the money already allocated, as it were, for these things?
Again, that's a great question. We've had to iterate as we've kind of diversified. So yes is the answer, but we've had to iterate it, and again, it's constantly evolving. So it's a kind of moving, living thing, really.
So I don't think so. The investors that you've reached out to in the past, now things have evolved. Maybe you've got more sales, or you've got different applications of money. Have you gone back to any investors that you've previously approached with a new presentation?
Not yet, although there is one in particular that I would like to go back to. There is one actually, and this is another, I guess, for early entrepreneurs. If you're looking at investors, look at their portfolio.
Yeah.
And study the portfolio, because if there's something that is of a competitive nature, they will listen to you. They'll listen to what you've got on offer, but you've got to be very cautious in terms of your approach. I had a meeting with one particular seed investment business, and we had 4 meetings, and we genuinely thought that was going to lead to investment. And it was at the last hurdle they said, not really good fit for us. And after that, we realized that actually there was a portfolio business within their existing offering that was very, very similar. So it was a fact-finding mission for them. So I think, I think going back to the earlier statement I mentioned about entrepreneurs, get out there and speak to investors as much as possible, but also do your own due diligence in terms of their portfolio and their offering.
Okay, so Darren Evans, thank you so much for talking to us. It's been really interesting hearing your story and your unique set of circumstances that's led to your investor interest and potential fundraising. So all I can say is thank you so much for talking to us.
Absolute pleasure, David, and all the best with Scrub the Deck. And clearly, if there are any investors out there that might want to have a chat, I'm available.
Well, this is your platform. So thank you. Thank you again. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.